Traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay our respects to their elders past and present and future. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people here today. I also need to announce that invitations were sent to the Honourable Sonia Kilkenny, member for Carrum, and also Paul Edbrook, member for Frankston. Both were invited to speak to you today to outline their vision for Frankston's future. At the point of printing this, there was no response. Has that altered? No. Pardon? Okay, Paul Edbrook has sent an apology for today. The first speaker is the Honourable KELVIN THOMSON. KELVIN, or KELVIN rather, sorry, was federal member for Wills for 20 years until 2016, and before that served as a state member of parliament and in local government. KELVIN has tirelessly brought the connection between planning pressures and environmental degradation to the fore in his words and deeds. A keen environmentalist and, as a member of parliament, vocally anti-nuclear, pro-sustainable population and pro-action on climate change, KELVIN was also an early advocate for banning political donations to developers, or by developers.
Yes, both.
Which is a really great thing. That's really creditable. Yeah. He is currently the convener of Planning Democracy, a network of resident action groups. So please welcome KELVIN.
Thank you very much, Glenn, and it's great to see so many people here this morning standing up for your community.
Yes.
And your civic mindedness is a powerful antidote to the greed and short-sightedness that dominates way too much of modern thinking and policy discussion. You know, I hear a certain amount of talk about NIMBYs. You realise that it is our responsibility to protect our neighbourhood. It is the Australian government's responsibility to protect Australia. It's the Victorian government's responsibility to protect Victoria. It's the Frankston Council's responsibility to protect Frankston. If we are not looking after our neighbourhood, our backyard, then we are not doing the right thing either by ourselves or by future generations. So that is not selfishness. Don't be seduced by these calls for unselfishness, which come with all the sincerity of a Mississippi riverboat gambler. I believe that people are entitled to a say in the character of their street, their neighbourhood, their community. When I was younger, and I was always been very interested in environmental things, I thought maybe centralised government might be better, and I saw a federal Labor government save the Franklin River. But over the years, I have realised that local communities can be relied on much more than remote bureaucrats or corporations to protect their patch. So the first thing is you are entitled to a say. And I also believe that democracy has to have content. If people don't feel that they have a genuine say in what is happening in their lives and in their neighbourhoods, then the fine words about democracy ring hollow and people become cynical and apathetic and democracy gradually gets eroded. So I believe that people need to be given a say, even if sometimes they make mistakes, need to be given a say in what happens in their lives and in their communities. The second thing I want to say is that democracy is that the density that we are seeing with the proposals here for these high-rise towers is bad for social justice. Now, one of the things that developers and their advocates will tell you is that this is good for housing affordability. They employ these spin merchants who are a bit like the tobacco lobby or the fossil fuel lobby, very good at throwing smoke. They'll tell you that this is good for housing affordability. In fact, it is the opposite. If you deregulate planning and allow developers to build high-rise buildings, the cost of land goes up. And the critical thing which is driving reduced housing affordability throughout Australia and beyond is rising land prices.
Right.
It's something that Professor Buxton, who's here, has mentioned in his submission to the Victorian Parliament's inquiry into planning and heritage protections, that deregulating planning allows for rising land prices and makes it harder for young people to afford to live, for example, in this suburb. And if these high-rise apartments are built, you can back it in that it won't be the young couriers delivering groceries or the Australia Post courier drivers who are living in those apartments. They will not be able to afford to live in them, and nor will young people generally. Housing prices will go up, housing affordability will decline. The third thing I want to say is that density is not good for the environment. Again, it's one of the things that property developers and their spin merchants are good at, and they've convinced VCAT and a few others that density is good for the environment. But the most recent State of the Environment report makes clear that this is not the case. It says that urban consolidation is putting pressure on open space. The loss of front yards and backyards leads to loss of vegetation, leads to a decrease in tree canopy cover, increasing urban heat island effect, and pressure on biodiversity, that it's bad for our physical and mental health. So the claimed environmental benefits are nonsense. One of the things that the planners and property developers have said over the years is that the density will get people out of their cars and reduce private transport. But let me tell you that last year there was a new car sold in Australia every 30 seconds, and that over the course of the past 20 years, the number of new cars sold in Australia has increased by 31%. Now, the reason for this is hiding in plain sight. The population of Australia has increased over the course of the last 20 years by 31%. So for all the high-rise and the ideas of planners, they are having no impact on new car ownership or car use at all. So density is not improving our environment. It's not improving housing affordability. The least affordable land in Australia is that in the major cities of Sydney and Melbourne, and that's also true globally. There's an international housing affordability index that says that the least affordable place in the world is Hong Kong, and it also happens to be one of the densest. Next observation I want to make concerns Barry Humphries. People have been thinking about him a lot recently given his passing, and he played a role in the formation of Planning Democracy. It was originally known as Planning Backlash and established a number of years ago by Mary Drost after a rally involving Barry Humphries. And Barry used to poke fun at the Melbourne suburbs and satirise them. But if you followed his stuff, you will realise that he had a great affection for Melbourne suburbia and understood that it gave people the capacity to live joyful and meaningful lives. And he said in a poem for a planner that For us, the whole of Melbourne is completely up for grabs, and our developer of choice uses the best of concrete slabs. And he knew what was happening to Melbourne and what was being lost in the process. And indeed, it's ironic that a property that his father built in Camberwell, called Rotherwood, number of apartments, is presently at risk of demolition. And the council gave them a demolition permit but put some conditions on it regarding vegetation, and they're appealing to VCAT so that they don't have to plant the vegetation. And the applicants are using consultants from Moonee Ponds, so it's kind of, yeah. Barry would have got the irony for sure, that it's Moonee Ponds' revenge on Camberwell. But the quality of life that we have and have enjoyed is something that we should pass on to our children and to our grandchildren. And when Melbourne, when Melbourne was being established over 100 years ago, a thing called the Garden City movement was very important. People were learning lessons from the slums of Dickensian London, that the air quality was poor, that the water quality was poor, that people didn't have any open space, didn't have front yards, didn't have backyards. It was bad for their health. And we understood back then, over 100 years ago, that density was bad for our health. But we've forgotten, and we paid a handsome price for that during the coronavirus pandemic. And if we don't remember that lesson, we will continue to pay that price, and the generations that come after us will pay that price. So it's fantastic that you're all here this morning. Keep up the struggle. More strength to your arm. Thank you.